Applying law and ethics to cyber threat intelligence. This module is intended to provide a basic introduction to the legal and ethical frameworks that surround cyber threat intelligence as a practice. Okay, let's jump in. So, cyber threat intelligence is an emerging discipline. This has come out time and time again during the course of this course. And as it is, it's currently not a regulated industry. However, there are a wider set of laws that are active that can be directly applied to cyber threat intelligence. Also, there's an emergent set of ethical norms that you should be also considering in your day-to-day work as well. So a logical place to start thinking about this is, what's the difference between law and ethics? Again, this is an extremely large topic. You can do an entire PhD trying to separate these two items, but we need to be a bit quicker than that. So I'm going to provide the following description and way to separate law and ethics. So what we're looking at here is a table. I've got law in the middle, ethics on the right-hand side, and the factors that, in my view, separate law and ethics. So really, at its core, what's the difference between legal guides and ethics guides? So the law is a set of rules and regulations not to break. Don't do this, and you won't break the law. It is probably an easy way to think about it. Ethics is something a little different. It's a set of guidelines that a person should follow. It's what they should be doing. Who governs this? Government, and the government of a state creates laws, and it's enforced by the judiciary and the police. Whereas ethics is, defined by individuals, legal and professional norms. But there are rights to enforce ethics as well. So, for example, within your organisation, you probably have ethical guidelines about doing ethical business, and if you breach those, that will be considered gross misconduct, and your company has the right to dispense with your services. Off the back end of that, you wouldn't be able to mount a legal challenge to that. So what happens if you breach the law? You can get custody or fine, and that's enforced by the state. However, if you breach ethics, it's a sanction. You could lose your job. You could lose your standing within the industry as well. Another way to look at this is, we've got sort of human behaviour, and we've got this idea of ethics, and at the core, we've got law. So in my mind, somebody once explained it to me, the law sort of stops at one point, and then ethics begin and cover a wider area of our human kind of behaviour, what we should or shouldn't be doing. Turning to the law initially, the entirety of the law applies to you just as it would any other person. Working within cyber threat intelligence, be it public or private sector, does not grant you immunity from the state's laws. This may seem obvious, but I've actually seen multiple occasions where people thought, because they were doing this for security reasons, they were doing it for the right reason, they could ride roughshod over laws and ethics. You can't. Sorry, you're governed by exactly the same laws that everybody else is that sits within the state. However, balanced with this is this idea that by doing cyber threat intelligence, it undoubtedly exposes you to more legal risks than more mainstream work. Over the last sort of 10 years, I've seen this in multiple times where I've ended up looking at very sensitive issues and trying to develop frameworks for navigating these. There are specific legal articles that you should be aware of within your professional practice. These 9 articles are all recommended as being extremely relevant to the practice of cyber threat intelligence. So there are situations where there's a clear right and wrong. So, for example, if somebody offered you money to disclose company information, asked you to break into a computer without justification, or you were told to find a conclusion with an analysis no matter what the data says, I'd hope sort of everybody faced with those situations would start thinking, oh, actually, I'm not too sure about this, where they'd sort of think, well, I need to speak to my line manager, or I'm not comfortable doing this kind of thing. However, some of these things are illegal and some of them are unethical. And how do you sort of separate the two? This is why we look at the separation between laws and ethics, and also in reality, the actual situations that you may face within cyber threat intelligence are not as clear cut as this. Take this example. I got this to my LinkedIn account. And what it's saying is, hello, we'd like to do a paid phone consultation opportunity for online risk protection and management solutions. So they're offering me a lot of money, so $350 just for an hour's conversation, where they would like to find out what on the surface looks fairly benign information. So, is this illegal? Is this unethical? Is it either or? I'll take a moment there and let you sort of have a think about it, and then I'll give you my reflection on this. So in my view, I do not think this initial approach is unethical. It is illegal. I don't think it's legal. But I do think it is unethical. And the reason why I think that is I think these types of approaches are simply a facade. What they're trying to do is get me on the phone, pay me quite a large sum of money, but then start getting disclosure about the company that I worked for at the time. So trying to get to the point where they're understanding the secret source of that organisation. And therefore that I consider that unethical. I'm not gonna tell you simply because you pay me a load of money. This in reality is actually probably the type of situation that you are going to find in cyber threat intelligence. It's not going to be just somebody giving you a grubby envelope full of money to make the wrong conclusion. In reality, it's things like this that would appear at first to be innocuous, but in reality hide something much darker. So to carry on with this, this idea of ambiguity and the ambiguity that you need to navigate within cyber threat intelligence, take, for example, the example of data breaches. They're a fixture of the IT landscape and have been for well over a decade. They happen every day, and there have been thousands individually, cumulatively, that cover hundreds of thousands, if not millions of records collectively. Breach victims will typically invest quite heavily in security after they've had a data breach, okay? And that's a sales opportunity, isn't it? So somebody's had a big data breach, you come in to the rescue and help them, and they'll probably spend money with you. They'll be more amiable to a conversation. So within this presents two ethical issues. So the idea of responsible disclosure versus ambulance chasing. So what's responsible disclosure? Responsible disclosure is if you find something that is damaging or incriminating or potentially sensitive about an organisation and they're not your client, what do you do with that data? Do you just sit on it? Do you do nothing? Or do you let them know? Do you notify them? And if you do notify them, that's called responsible disclosure. They're not your client, but you're telling them about something bad that's happened to them. Ambulance chasing, on the other hand, is using that mechanism to try and make a sale. So in other words, you find out somebody's been breached, you give them a call and you say, we found all this data about you. If you buy our services, I'll tell you. That would be certainly considered ambulance chasing. So this raises some quite challenging questions about the ethics of this. Take, for example, responsible disclosure. Say, for example, you decide to enact an ethical policy where you notify everybody that you have data on them. Well, that would take an awfully long time. So even if you just look on Wikipedia, the most sort of throwaway of kind of sources, you can see the amount of data breaches runs into the thousands. If you were going to do that, you would do nothing else. You'd spend your day notifying people. So actually, people invested in your company for you to achieve something for the customers of that company and the shareholders of that company, not just for everybody else. So you're then faced with an ethical issue. Do I disclose? Do I not disclose in those areas as well? There's this idea of ambulance chasing as well. None of us work for free. Well, I hope not. None of us work for free. We're in a commercial enterprise in what we're doing. And ultimately, we have to make sales to survive. Even if you're in the public sector, ultimately, you have to have some kind of traction or the equivalent of a sale. So this idea of, do you notify victims of a breach is very, very difficult to navigate. Take, for example, the MERS-CAC, where you were looking at disruption of critical infrastructure, where there was the potential for that to have a huge impact on people's lives, if not a safety critical impact. What would you do in that situation? Would you then notify? Would you sit on it? What would you try and do? Personally, myself, in that situation, I would have made the decision to notify that company, and if we made a sale, that wouldn't have affected my position. Whether they've been a previous customer either, I'd have notified them around that as well. This comes into sharp relief when you start dealing with protectively marked documents. There's probably quite a strong chance that during your career in cyber threat intelligence, you're going to come across documents that have been protectively marked or classified by your government or another government. So again, I won't beat around the bush with this. Take, for example, WikiLeaks and the disclosure of an enormous trove of US protectively marked documents. What do you do if you turn up, you're doing an investigation and suddenly you turn up almost by accident with a trove of these documents? What would you do in that case? For me, it's almost like you're in a shop and you see somebody shoplifting or you see a crime going on. What would you do in that scenario? Would you just do nothing and keep shopping? Or would you alert security? Would you do something about it? I suppose there's really no kind of right or wrong answer, and this is a personal ethical issue. You're not there to enforce security or the law, but if you observe something wrong, what do you do about it? How do you navigate that space?